Well, hello everyone. I am getting ready to get started here on what might be your very last code demo. So hopefully I'll get through quite a lot in the next hour. If I don't, I'll make another video. I'm thinking about possibly making a second video on some of the advanced topics, but we'll just have to see where we finish up today. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about today you can find in the PowerPoint called Intro to Coding in the Arts, Coding in P5.js, Part 3. You also will find in this PowerPoint a thorough review of the iteration that we did in the last demo. And so I am going to sneak in some examples of iteration into this demo just as a review. And we're also going to be using quite a lot of if statements and else statements. So that's another place where we're going to kind of look at things. Broadly, in sort of broad terms, in interaction, you have system variables which contain information about what's going on. For example, what are the coordinates of the mouse? And then, of course, we have coordinates of the previous mouse coordinate, which is kind of useful for calculating things like speed. And then p mouse y. There's also plenty of other system variables like the key code and other variables like that. But it's just important to know that they're variables. They store data and they can spit data back out. We also have several functions that we're going to take a look at, and those functions are as follows. You can see there's multiple mouse states. These are all just related to mouse functions. And then, of course, we also have variables and functions related to the keyboard. So we're going to spend some time looking at both of those things today. Before we do, one thing I wanted to kind of sneak in was this idea of the map function. So I know that there's a discussion or there's an example of the map function in the examples for today, which I'm going to be adding what we do in class probably to this document. And that's great, but it's kind of a very narrow example. It converts mouse values, and I wanted to try using the map function to actually use a different type of color space. So I'm going to get into my sketch here. One thing that I want to just throw out there, I've seen a couple, not just a couple, I've seen several examples of what y'all are doing with code, and I think you're all doing a really great job. One thing that I would encourage you to kind of remember as you approach your code is that the setup function, there should only be one, and it should be in the beginning, meaning before another function. And likewise, the draw function, there should only be one draw function. And really, the draw function can contain most of your sketch. And then up here at the top, I would put my variable declarations. So let's see, I'm going to just go ahead and maybe make one called hue. Yeah, I'll call it hue view. Why not? And that's basically just going to contain the hue color. So I'm going to set it to 0 right now. I'm going to leave myself a little breadcrumb so I can remember what it is. And up to this point in P5.js, we've been dealing with issues around RGB color. We've really exclusively been dealing with RGB color. But there is another way. There are several color modes that you can use in P5.js. So if we run over here to color, you can see that there's a color mode function, which we're going to be using in just a second. But just to kind of show you what's available it can be RGB, HSB, or HSL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the HSB color mode. And so what's cool about that is that with HSB, you actually have a hue value, a saturation value, and a brightness value. So if I were to ask you how to iterate through a rainbow in RGB, it would be pretty complicated because all of the different color values, RGB, are going to be different, and they're not necessarily in some great, numerical pattern. So with HSB, we can just say, go from 0 to whatever the upper boundary number is. In this case, default is 255, and it'll go through the entire color spectrum all at once. So in my mind, for coding, I think HSB is actually a much easier color mode to use. But it's not very common, so I don't always introduce it until maybe the second or third lecture. So we're going to use the color mode function here. And as I said, I'm going to select HSB. And you have an option when you select the color mode of actually controlling the range of the color. So for example, the default range, as we've already, discussed and have, coded in colors, is from 0 to 255, right? So if we do nothing, that will be the range. If we want the range to be something different, we can set the range here to be 100 or 1,000 or whatever, some reasonable number. I think that here we could probably set it to 100. Now that means there will be 100 possible options of hue. So if you set it too low, it's going to start looking really stripy and kind of weird, And we can talk about this and maybe expand this later if we want to. But for now, we have a color mode. So our background at this point should look pretty funny because we've switched color modes and we haven't really addressed the background. So let's see what happens here with our good old background. It looks white. So one problem with HSB is that the background is, our color mode is 100, and the background, our possible upper limit of the color value is 100, and the background is 220. So we kind of have to convert this into some sort of, we could just do white. So with white, you can say that the hue is actually 0, the brightness is 100, and the hue, saturation, brightness, actually the brightness would also be, saturation would be 0, and the brightness would be 100. And that, as promised, that gives us white. Here, if we set the brightness down to 0, that's going to give us black. So we don't really have to play with this too much because I'm hoping that the background will actually be irrelevant. But I just wanted to show you how to use an HSB color space real quickly. So let's think about ways that we could deal with this color. I'm going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to make it just put some simple values in here. So I'm doing 100 by 100, width divided by 2 is one of my favorite and height divided by 2. That's going to throw it at the center of the screen. And you can see, right now, it doesn't look like it really has any anchor or anything like that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to make the canvas just a tiny bit bigger. And it looks like I would actually like the X and Y coordinates here to be over here. And then I'm just kind of fiddling around with this, so hang on for just 1 second. Okay, so that should be actually more what I'm looking for right at this moment. And that is that our rectangle is actually drawn at width divided by 2, height divided by 2, and that its scale is 100 by 100. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little note here that goes something like this, just to remind myself, or if I were you, I would remind myself of that. And the next thing that we have to do here is what's called a fill. So we've done fills before. It's not any big deal, but let's go ahead and construct it so that we can have the hue value. So that's hue view that we created up here, and then a 0, 0 sort of situation. I probably will end up changing this to 100 once it gets a color. So that's fine right now. Okay, so then what we really want to do kind of previous to this point is, I mean, right now you can see that hue view is 0, right? So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to real quickly think about how we can fill hue view with the value. And so in this case, I think I'm going to say hue view equals mouse x. And the reason I choose mouse x is because it's a, it's an interaction variable, but it's also a value that should change. And so then down here, I'm going to print hue view. And you can see it's 0 because I haven't entered the window yet. But then when I enter the window, it's going to go all over the place. And as you can see, it's going all the way up to 500, right? Which is kind of weird because my color spectrum only goes up to 100. So that's a little bit of an issue, right? It's going to make it kind of hard. You may also be asking yourself, I'm not really seeing much color, and the saturation is still set to 0. So let's bring that saturation up. And you can see now what's happening. We're moving through the entire color spectrum, and about the time it gets to 100 is when it will just stay there, and then it stays on red, right? And that's not really what we want. We want to use the entire width of the screen to control the color, right? Okay, so how are we going to fix that is the question. We could actually fix this really simply by dividing by 5. That would be actually the easiest way to fix it. So we could just say hue view equals and so basically that just fixed our problem. So we're going through the entire color spectrum now, and we could put this down here one line, and we'll be able to see the value of hue view after it's had that mathematical operation applied to it. And you can see it's going from 1 very slowly 1 to 100. That's pretty cool. All right, thanks. Now, this is we got kind of lucky, in other words, that the numbers worked out. Quite often they don't. So let's make it not work. And I'll show you another way to fix it. So you could certainly, I'm going to change the color range to 255. And you can see now I've got kind of icky saturation and not really great brightness. That's because I'm in the middle of the range here. So I would want to actually make my bright values, turn these to 255 for saturation and brightness to get that kind of bright, pure color again. I also added a semicolon to that because, I'm just that kind of curmudgeon, I guess. So what you're going to be kind of thinking about here is now, instead of dividing by 5, what would we need to do to expand that range of numbers to, or actually contract it from between 1 and 500, right? That's the width. And those are the possible values that are coming through mouse X. What do I need to do to scale those numbers down to a numerical range between 1 and 255? And what you need to do is, I would just use the map function, probably. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out, so it's kind of in its broken state again, where it's not quite moving through the entire color spectrum. And let's see if we can use the map function. So with the map function, it is really asking for the value that you want to convert, which in this case is hue view. It asks for the bottom of the current value range, which in this case is 0, and asks for the top of the current value range, or the maximum, which is mouse X. And in fact, we could actually set that to width, because mouse X is not at that number all the time. So this makes much more sense. So that would be width, which is 500. We can also then pass through the new range. And so we want to change that to between 0 and 255. And I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of this. And now I should be able to navigate through here and print. It's printing to the console. So I should be able to see that it's going to hit that 255 value. Oh, that's because sorry, I set it up wrong. So one thing that I would do in this case is probably create a temporary variable. And because, sorry, that was just me being kind of silly. So you can kind of do this a bunch of different ways, but I'm basically just making a little temporary variable right here. And then that actually is the one that gets assigned the value that comes from the map function. And then I assign hue view equal to t. So it's a little bit of like a jog around the block, but it does get the job done. And so I'm going kind of slowly through to the end of the range to see what's happening here. And bingo, it looks like the end of my color range now is at about 255. And as promised, it's red. There we go. And then it goes through the entire range of hue. So yay, we did that. That was cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And now at this point, we said something about wanting to make like a for loop or something. Well, we could certainly like come in here and just make this a little bit smaller so it's not quite so large. And sure, I mean, let's say that I wanted to create a for loop. I could certainly come in here and go ahead and iterate this thing. So I'm going to just do a regular old I equals 0. It's pretty standard fare here. I is, let's say, less than, I don't know, like 100. I just picked that number out of my brain. And we'll do an I++. So this is going to be pretty easy to work with. I need a closing curly brace for this code to run. So, and then I also need an opening curly brace. So it should be all good now. Excuse me, I am writing in another language right now. Haha. There we go. Just I equals 0 is all that's necessary there. And it looks like what I would consider doing before we kind of pull this for loop in is I would consider working from the center, actually, in this case. So I'm going to translate to the width divided by 2, height divided by 2. And go ahead then for this part, I'm going to use 0, 0, because what I've done is I've effectively changed the location of 0, 0. But 0, 0 is not going to really do me very much good because, well, I mean, it will, but it's not going to do a lot of good in the sense that our drawing has a couple of issues right now. One, and this is a little bit annoying, I can't see the rectangle right now until I get probably onto to this part. And actually, I can't see the rectangle at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, which is really strange because I'm not actually doing anything to it. So I'm going to just comment out some stuff and make sure that it's okay. Okay, so I can't see it under normal circumstances. So that's something to know. So that makes me want to consider maybe making the default value of hue view actually white so I can see it. Because right now we're black against a black background, and that's just not very, it's not super useful. Oh, hey, here it is. It's all the way up here. Okay. Well, that stands to reason because I changed it to be positioned at 0, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and bring back this for loop. And this end curly bracket. And I'm guessing what has probably happened is that the scene is kind of translating itself off the screen. So I'm going to use the push and pop method as we did in another video to kind of get this to work correctly. Also, I think I'm going to move myself out of the way here. Okay, so interesting. Should be at 0, 0. So when I'm in situations like this where I can't see stuff on the screen that I think should be working, one thing that I like to do is to get to the print function. And I'll just call it maybe like, you know, I'll pass a string through the print function. So if you put quotes on it, it will type a word. And in this case, my suspicion is that the, yeah, right. So this is why it's great to have a class full of people that can raise their hands and tell me that I'm an idiot. So it looks like what's happening here is that this for loop is not activating. In other words, it's not passing the test because yours truly did not look at it carefully. So what's happening is that it's saying for I equals 0. All right, that's pretty normal. And then I is less than 100. Yeah, that's pretty normal too. Oh, except I is not less than 100. I is greater than 100 because I messed up. So what I would need to do is just flip that. And then I should be, yeah, oh my goodness, now everything works now. Look at that. So yeah, for sure, little details like this can make a massive difference. They can make the difference between wrong and right. What I do kind of want to communicate to y'all is that using this print function is a really great way to see how your code is flowing and whether the compiler or the interpreter in this case is even getting to what you're getting to. So this is kind of debugging 101. In any case, I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to comment it out. What I would like is I would like to start actually repeating this thing as part of the sort of iteration. And so I think what I could probably do is I could think about using the location of maybe I times 10 and then I times 10 here. How did I know it was I times 10? Could be I times 20, you know, it's just a guess. I guess I knew because the top number here is 100 and we have about 500, you know, options or possible coordinates on the screen. So making it I times 10 is going to be basically a number between 1 and 1,000. So yeah, you know, we could do I times 5, and that would probably work too. It's going to be a little tighter. I times 5 here. Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, so let's add one more layer of interaction. I think that it would be really neat to make this thing sort of rotatey or spinny based on some sort of mouse pressing and dragging. So we can certainly use the mouse dragged function. And the mouse dragged function, let's see. Dun, 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 dun. So the mouse dragged function is kind of fun in that you can add a call once every mouse is pressed and moved. So with mouse states in general, you may notice as you read through these that they are very specific. In fact, for just one mouse, and this is an actual old school mouse, not even thinking about multi-touch, one mouse can produce like 8 different actions. So you want to read very carefully when you're looking at mouse functions of what they actually do. So the mouse dragged function is called once every time the mouse moves and a button is pressed. If mouse dragged it's not defined, then the touch moved function will be called instead. Blah, blah, blah. Here's a good disclaimer. Browsers may have different default behaviors attached to various mouse events. To prevent any default behavior for this event, add return false to the end of the method. And you can see that that was done here. So let's kind of put this into place, okay? So I'm gonna just grab this. So if I'm putting in a mouse function, by the way, and I'm using an actual function, I know it's a function because it says function. If I'm doing that, I really want to put it beneath my draw function and not inside of my draw function, because if it's inside of my draw function, it will not work. Okay, good. So let's say if the mouse is dragged, first of all, let's make some variable up called rotate, and let's give it some kind of default value of like something like that. Okay, so I think, let's see, for mouse dragged, let's have rotation plus equal well, could be rotation. So we're going to double it every time mouse dragged is activated. So that's great. You know, we can go ahead and do that. but you may notice it's not doing anything. That's true. It's not doing anything because we're not using the value of the rotation anywhere else. And so I think that probably the best place to put it would be inside the push and pop, because it is a so-called matrix transformation. So we can even put it inside the for loop, and that would be even better. So I'm just going to rotate on a 2D axis. And so I want to rotate it by rot. And you can see right now I've got, whoa, that definitely did things. Hey. So really simple amount of interaction. I guess my one observation on this interaction is that once you get it kind of launched off into space, you can't really get it back. And so what would be amazing here is if we could get some sort of like a return to sender sort of thing. So in other words, maybe we could click and it would go back to from where it came. We could also start with this in kind of a more neutral position. I know that it already starts with a slight curve, and so if we started it with 0, 0, it would be kind of just dead straight. And then we could come back here and we could be very specific about like what kind of a rotation we wanted it to give. So we could say, okay, it's going to be 0, 0, 5. And so then it's not, we can see that initial pull away. It's very satisfying. Okay, so that's great. We're talking about adding another interaction. Okay. How about mouse clicked? Function mouse clicked. Spelling is hard. So the mouse clicked is my kind of personal favorite because it's a little bit foolproof. What needs to happen for the mouse clicked function to work is not only that it is clicked, but that it is released as well. And so it needs to be clicked and released. You can see there's all kinds of like intermediary states in between the pressing, the clicking. The clicking is a full interaction. So it's the press, the potential drag or move, and then the release. And so that's the important thing to remember, is that click is the whole click from start to finish. It's kind of the common sense click, or what most people would consider a click. Makes it a little easier. Okay, so we're going to make this mouse click do what? We're going to make it reset the rotation. Well, so that's actually super simple. We can just say rotation plus equals 0. And so let's observe that now. Wow, 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 crazy stuff happening. And I click again. Let me try setting, doing something that I know should be done. So this actually, I'm going to comment out. I just want to basically print myself a test of this function to see when this function is getting called. And hopefully it's when I click. Okay, there we go. That's good. Try it again. Yep. Yep. Okay. All right. So then how about this? Let's say if mouse is clicked, let's go ahead and make a variable. So I'm going to make a variable called start state, and I'm going to say that start state is false. True. Change my mind. True. Okay. So, very good. Okay. So, if mouse clicked, let's say that then start state, I'm already spelling it wrong, equals false. And just to make sure, extra sure, I'm gonna comment this out and I'm gonna print the value to the console. Okay, so it's false. It's false. Still false. Still false. It looks like it was false, you know, pretty much from the beginning though. So I'm just gonna check that one more time. I mean, inherently, if I'm clicking it, then it's making it false. So it should be printing as false. Okay, sure, that's great. So, one thing that I would like to do is up here, I think I would like to start to put in a little bit of a logic test, otherwise known as an if statement, so that the way the interaction works is that this runs only if start state is true. So that's just one way of doing it, but I think let's go ahead and try it. Okay, so if start state is true, do a bunch of stuff. There we go. Let me do some indentation here. Okay, so see, I forgot a curly brace. Boy, I am feeling sloppy today. It's also a little bit annoying that they kind of add it in sometimes, but not always. Okay, we can all talk about how annoying P5 is on some other trip. So, okay, we're going, and it goes false. It goes false, and it doesn't run, right? So probably what I would want to think about doing is, oh, well, this was stupid. I'm kind of seeing what I messed up down here in the very beginning anyway. So when this click goes off, it is going to return the rotation to 0. So I can push the rotation back up with the interaction, right? Now that it's dragging this back to 0, what I would say is that, okay, start state is true. Let's put in a slightly more complicated set of choices here. So right now we're only testing for whether start state is true. And one thing we haven't really talked about much, but it was in the PowerPoint last week, was this idea of compound logic statements, or using and or operators to create double if statements. And so what happens is we've got one statement over here on the left, if start state equals true. And we can also have another state here saying maybe something like, or this two pipe operator is for or, that rotation equals 0. Double equal sign, because you're in a for loop. And so as promised now, if I click, it is going to reset, although it looks like there's some weirdness going on. I'm going to take a quick pause to answer my phone. Hi, welcome back, everyone. Take a little detour there. So, I came up with the solution for this particular issue, and it's a little bit more nuanced than just having, just having one if statement with a kind of or loop. What I came up with was actually kind of think, and sometimes when you're dealing with conditionals, you really have to kind of think through what you actually want the program to do. And so in this case, what's happening is when the mouse is clicked, we're resetting the rotation value to 0. We were then, back up here, we were immediately asking that rotation of 0 to control the running of this, basically all the graphics. And obviously, that's not a good solution because when we're using the mouse dragged function, which kind of automatically gets triggered, it's going to add some value to the rotation. So what I decided to do instead was to use the rotation as kind of a reset, in which the rotation being 0 actually flips the Boolean variable called start state to true. And then you can test for whether start state is true. Now, you might be asking yourself, Meg, why wouldn't you just test for rotation equals 0? Well, getting to my previous point, that when you click, you're also dragging. So the rotation is very quickly not 0. So this ends up being the correct, or not correct, the workable solution in this case for this particular sketch. Now, let's move on a little bit. Well, or if not move on, let's take this sketch and make it just maybe a little bit more cleaned up and nuanced. So one thing that I wanted to ask about was this idea of using mouse dragged. Well, in order to use mouse dragged, you have to first click. So when we're using mouse dragged, we're effectively opening up a click. So what might be more, we could try using mouse pressed instead. That would still start the process of a click. So, well, kind of what am I going on about right now? What's wrong with the click? Well, okay, so here I'm dragging and I'm clicking, and then it resets. Click, drag, reset. It's a little difficult to tell because I'm on a trackpad, so that's maybe not actually the best, environment to be developing in. In any case, I think that we could sort of liberate like the first click from the dragging motion. And what that would allow us to do is just to find ourselves in a position where maybe, for example, we click the mouse once and it operates at a certain speed, or it can just automatic instead of having it drag. So for that to happen, I would probably first disable the mouse dragged function. So no problem, just going to comment that out. So what I can do here is in the mouse clicked function, I can take the mouse clicked function. I still want to keep that start state in there, but what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to create a couple of different speeds of rotation. So we could say here something like if I'm just going to bring up this thing in the reference to make sure I get it right. I'm actually going to take a look at this. Okay. That is pretty much what I was looking for. So we're going to say here, within the mouse clicked function, we're just going to say, we're going to make it as simple as possible here because we could have a bunch of if statements, but it's not really necessary. Click plus equals 1. And so what we're going to do, we kind of did this backwards. I'm using a variable right now that does not exist. So I'm going to run up here and just declare it so I can use it with caps lock on, to be sure. So var click, oh my goodness, equals, let's set it to 0 for starters. And so every time the mouse is clicked, it's going to add a click plus equals, will plus equal 1. And so I'm just kind of getting rid of some white space here. So somewhere within this for loop, we want to basically adjust the speed of the rotation. We could do it within the for loop, or if we want to just keep our stuff a little bit cleaner and a little less nested, we could put it outside of the for loop, and that would be just fine. One thing that I like to do when I'm working with code in general is like if it's all on the same, in the same function, for example, I try to kind of group it. So you can see here is all the stuff that has to do with the hue view thing. And then here, I'm just going to have a couple of little if statements. So I'm going to have if click equals 1, then do this thing. And then I'm going to use an else if. Okay, so, and so I've got this rotation with the addition, which is basically controlling the rotation, right? So, so here, if the click equals 1, I'm going to have it at the sort of standard speed. And then if click equals 2, I'm going to make it just faster, basically. And then we can do this again for if click equals 3, although that's getting a little absurd. You could have 20 of these if you wanted to, but you don't really need to have that many. 3 speed phases seems completely fine. And so now let's sort of start to kind of put this into practice. So what we have here is still, it looks like we are looking for it looks like we're missing something. Okay, yes, typo. That's likely. Ah. Interesting. So I'm going to just real quickly they took out the if-else statement. That's terrible. Okay, so we can just use a regular old else. And then I still need that back in there. Fascinating. So I'm guessing that something really basic is wrong here and I'm just not seeing it. So I'm gonna not prolong the agony. I'll just pause for one quick second and I'll be right back. Okay, there's a couple things that we didn't consider, which is kind of how it works. So let's see. I'm going to create a variable called rote speed. And I'm just going to use that to hold the speed instead of passing these numerical values through the if statements. So we're going to start with like the slow speed. And just to kind of make sure that that works, I'm going to rotate by rote speed. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back this mouse dragged function because we kind of need it in order to tell if our changes are having any impact on the sort of part of the sketch that's changing. And okay, it looks like setting that to 0. Just going to start it over from the beginning. Okay, so looks like we're pretty much dead in the water at this point. I'm going to comment this code out because it's not really helping me right at the moment, and I want to make sure that I didn't break things kind of beyond, you know, what has already been broken. So it looks like I'm still sort of getting that weird thing of nothing happening, which is a little bit interesting. So I'm also going to turn off this click iterator. Okay. So I'm just right now, I'm kind of checking over all of the code to make sure that my curly braces are in the right place, make sure that everything has kind of an answer. I'm going to turn this off for just 1 second. Oh, very interesting. Okay, so still it doesn't seem to work. So rotation is rote speed. Okay, so in this case we're actually rotating by, that's why, because I made a stupid mistake. In this case, I'm actually want to use this as the value of the rotation increase rather than the value that is getting rotated every single time. So we want to go ahead and push this back to rote. And then here, I think I actually want this to be rote speed. And so, yay, now it should be basically like, you know, adding those coordinates in. And it looks like it's on kind of the slow train right now. One thing we could do, I think, is we should probably move these guys down into the mouse dragged function if we want to have multiple speeds. So a lot of this is really just, you know, trying to figure out from trial and error, like what works. So here we could try something like, let me uncomment these. And so we could try something like, let's say the default is rote speed plus equals rote speed. And then here we would do rote speed maybe times 2. And then we could have one more just for 3 to kind of, illustrate the point. And in any case, you could have, many of these different states kind of programmed into the mouse dragged function. So you're actually already, you're using the function mouse clicked to actually set the number of the click. And I'm actually going to print out the click for you, so you can see when that comes up, which click we're on. And so that we should be all ready to go now. So if I come through now, notice that it doesn't kind of activate a click, which is this test, until I've lifted my hand off the mouse. So while I'm clicking and dragging, you can see it's going a little bit speedier now. That's going to put out a click. If I actually ask for the value of click, that might be more useful to us. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So, okay, so here's 1, kind of slow. Here's 2, less slow. And then here's 3. Looks like it's getting on with itself. So we could kind of make these values even more different if we wanted to kind of really get across the point that, it's accelerating. One thing that, is not built into this is like an ultimate reset, which I think that could be potentially pretty useful. So I'm kind of like covering everything mostly in one sketch here. But this sort of ultimate reset thing we could do with the keyboard. And basically what we want to do is we just want to set it back to itself. And you can see 3 there is like, whoa, really fast. So if we want to put in like a reset function, that's a totally reasonable thing to do. I'm going to grab something from the PowerPoint. And that is, we're going to be using the sort of key pressed and the key code. So let me just type in here a key pressed. So we need the word function first. And then we're going to open it up. And so now we have this key press thing where we can type pretty much anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an if statement to detect which key we're pressing. So I'm going to say if key code equals, I'm going to go for lowercase r, and I'm also going to do or if key code equals uppercase R. And the reason I'm going to put either case is fine is because you never know when somebody is trying to use your code and they have their caps lock on. So it's kind of considered good practice to always encompass, the case distinction there. So if key code R or R, then we are going to turn the rotation. You could say we're going to turn the rotation back to 0, and that would be, that would do some stuff. But what we really want to do, the rotation gets set back to 0 every time we click. What we really want to do here with the key press is we want to set the click back to 0 so that we can kind of start over. So click equals 0. And let's see, it looks like we have 1 extra curly brace, which is kind of, there we go. So now 1, we're going slow. 2, we're going less slow. 3, we're going pretty fast. And let me press R. Now I am back at Slowtown. So, of course, when I have any kind of interaction elements, it's usually a good idea to print something out to the console. So I'm just going to leave you with this one thing where I'll press, and in fact, it might be something kind of custom. So if I put quotes around it, it will print that word in the console so that I can click 1, click 2, click 3, and then hit R to reset. It is definitely doing it though. All right. Well, that I think wraps it up for today. I am going to be making another video this week related to code. I'm going to make another video that is specific to some of the advanced code that we have on the website. And some of the sort of sound and video examples. So if you're in that category of people who are thinking about, using some of the advanced code, I'll have a short video just kind of introducing them. So don't be afraid to email me or text me. Email me for help, and we can get you taken care of this week. Have a great week. Bye.